In the quiet town of Millbrook Valley, a former elite Pinkerton agent works as a humble store clerk, keeping his past hidden. But when a dangerous gang threatens the peace of his new home, he must decide whether to maintain his cover or embrace the skills he left behind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Millbrook General Store stands as a testament to time at the corner of Main and Cedar Streets, its weathered brick facade telling stories of the countless seasons it has witnessed. The year is 1895, and while larger cities embrace the rapid pace of industrialization, this corner of Montana territory holds onto its frontier charm with quiet determination. The morning sun casts long shadows through the store's recently cleaned windows, where jars of candy and essential supplies create an inviting display for passers-by. Inside, Marcus Drake carefully arranges a new shipment of canned goods on the sturdy wooden shelves. At 35, his movements are precise and economical, betraying a grace that seems at odds with his simple shopkeeper's attire. His dark hair, neatly trimmed and showing traces of grey at the temples, frames a face that customers find trustworthy, though few notice the alertness in his hazel eyes or the way he positions himself to always face the door. The store's bell chimes as Sarah Montgomery, the schoolteacher, enters with her usual morning cheerfulness. "Good morning, Mr. Drake. I trust you've received those primers I ordered." Her presence brings a genuine smile to Marcus's otherwise reserved demeanor. In the 8 months since he purchased the store, Sarah has become one of his most reliable customers and, perhaps, the closest thing he has to a friend in Millbrook Valley. "Just arrived yesterday, Miss Montgomery. I set them aside specially." Marcus retrieves a carefully wrapped package from behind the counter. The transaction is simple, but Sarah lingers, as she often does, to share the latest town news. "Have you heard about the trouble over in Copper Creek?" she asks, her voice dropping to a concerned whisper. "They say the Red River Gang has been making their way through the territory. 3 stores have been robbed in the past month alone." Marcus's hand unconsciously brushes against his left side, where a hidden holster remains empty these days. "I'm sure the local authorities have matters well in hand," he responds diplomatically, though his mind already catalogues the gang's known patterns from newspapers he regularly receives from neighboring towns. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of William Buck Thorne, the youngest deputy in town, Marshal Hayes's office. Though barely 23, Buck carries himself with the enthusiasm of someone eager to prove his worth. "Morning, Mr. Drake, Miss Montgomery. Just making my rounds." His hand rests casually on his gun belt, a gesture Marcus recognizes as more nervous habit than necessity. As Sarah leaves with her primers, Buck leans against the counter, his voice low. "Marshal Hayes wanted me to warn all the businesses. We've had reports of strangers asking questions about town, specifically about which establishments do their banking runs on which days." Marcus nods, maintaining his shopkeeper's pleasant expression, while his mind shifts into a familiar analytical mode. The Red River Gang's methodology becomes clearer. They're not just opportunistic thieves, but calculated predators, selecting their targets with precision. The rest of the morning passes with the routine rhythm of a small-town store. Marcus serves his regular customers, Mrs. Chen from the laundry picking up supplies, old Mr. Patterson haggling over the price of tobacco, and young Tommy Wilson spending his carefully saved pennies on candies. Each interaction is handled with the same careful attention that once made Marcus one of the Pinkerton agency's most effective operatives. It's during the quiet afternoon lull that Marcus notices them. 3 men he's never seen before, watching the store from the saloon across the street. Their clothes are trail-worn, but their boots are quality leather, and the way they carry themselves speaks of men accustomed to violence. One of them, a tall figure with a distinctive scar running Down his neck matches the description of James "Scarred Jack" Morrison, the Red River Gang's suspected leader. Marcus continues his work, appearing absorbed in his ledger while covertly observing their patterns. They're taking note of delivery times, watching customer flows, likely planning their approach. It's the same methodical surveillance he himself employed countless times during his Pinkerton days. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across Main Street, Marcus closes up shop with his usual precision. He checks each window, secures the back door, and ensures the day's earnings are safely stored in the hidden compartment he installed beneath the floorboards. A habit from his previous life that still serves him well. Walking home to his modest room above the town's only bakery, Marcus reflects on the peace he's found in Millbrook Valley. After 15 years with the Pinkerton agency, tracking dangerous criminals across the country and protecting railway interests during the labor disputes, he'd chosen this quiet life deliberately. The store had offered anonymity, respectability, and most importantly, distance from the violence that had defined his earlier years. But as he prepares for bed, his routine is different tonight. He removes a loose brick from the chimney, retrieving a small wooden box he hasn't opened since arriving in town. Inside, wrapped in waxed cloth, lies his Pinkerton badge and a carefully maintained Smith & Wesson Model 3 revolver. Marcus doesn't touch either item, but their presence reminds him of a promise he made to himself, to leave that life behind. Yet, as he lies in bed, listening to the distant sounds of the saloon closing for the night, Marcus knows that Millbrook Valley's peace hangs by a thread. The Red River Gang's reputation for brutality is well earned, and if they've indeed set their sights on the town, decisions will need to be made. The question that keeps him awake isn't whether he can stop them. His skills are as sharp as ever. But whether revealing his true identity would destroy the quiet life he's built here. The soft glow of the moon illuminates his room, and in its light, Marcus Drake, former Pinkerton agent turned shopkeeper, begins to plan. Not for tomorrow's inventory or next week's orders, but for contingencies he hoped never to need again. Because while he may have chosen to leave his past behind, that past has given him the tools to protect his new home. If it comes to that. Later, that night, a commotion from the street draws Marcus to his window. Through the gap in his curtains, he observes two of the strangers from earlier, roughing up young Charlie Weber, the telegraph operator's son. The boy had likely been running a late-night message, a common occurrence in a town where news travels. At all hours, Marcus watches as the men shove Charlie against a hitching post, demanding information about the town's businesses. Their voices carry clearly in the quiet night air, confirming Marcus's suspicions about their intentions. The boy, showing remarkable courage, keeps his mouth shut despite their intimidation. The scene stirs something in Marcus he's tried to suppress. For months, a familiar surge of controlled anger mixed with tactical assessment. From his vantage point, he catalogues details with practiced efficiency. The men's weapons, worn Colt revolvers carried low, their positioning, amateur, too focused on the boy to watch their surroundings, and their increasing frustration. Before Marcus can decide whether to intervene, Marshal Hayes's deputy Buck appears at the far end of the street, making his nightly rounds. The thugs immediately release Charlie, transforming their aggressive postures into exaggerated friendliness. They even help dust off the boy's clothes, playing the scene as nothing more than good-natured roughhousing. Charlie, though shaken, has enough sense to play along, but as the boy hurries away, he glances up at Marcus's window, their eyes meeting briefly. In that moment, Marcus realizes that maintaining his cover might come at too high a cost. The Red River Gang isn't known for leaving witnesses, and young Charlie has just become a liability to their plans. Returning to his bed, Marcus lies awake, his mind working through scenarios with the methodical precision that once made him the agency's top operative in the Montana Territory. 8 months ago, he'd chosen Millbrook Valley precisely because it was off the beaten path, far from the railroad disputes and labor conflicts that had dominated his Pinkerton career. The store had seemed the perfect cover, a respectable business that allowed him to start fresh while keeping tabs on the region's criminal movements through customer gossip and his newspaper subscriptions. But now, watching the Red River Gang case the town, Marcus recognizes the signs of an impending storm. Their presence has already begun to change the atmosphere of Millbrook Valley. Earlier that day, he'd noticed Mrs. Chen hurrying past the saloon, instead of taking her usual route, and Mr. Patterson mentioning that his wife didn't feel comfortable at the store with those types hanging around. As dawn approaches, Marcus makes his way down to the bakery below his room, nodding to Eleanor Burke, the owner, as she prepares the day's first batch of bread. The aroma of fresh-baked goods fills the air, a pleasant contrast to the tension of the night before. Eleanor, a widow who'd taken over her husband's business 3 years ago, has been a kind landlady and another source of town information. "Those new fellows have been hanging around," Eleanor mentions casually, though Marcus catches the worry in her voice. "They've been asking about when folks get their deliveries, when the bank wagon comes through." She pauses, kneading dough with more force than necessary. "Reminds me of the trouble we had in '89, before the cavalry cleaned out. That Mason gang." Marcus helps himself to coffee, considering Eleanor's words. The Mason gang had indeed been similar, systematic in their approach, targeting small towns with limited law enforcement. The Pinkertons had been involved in that operation, though Marcus had been working a different case at the time. He'd read the reports, however, and the parallels are striking. As he prepares to open the store for another day, Marcus knows he's running out of time to make his decision. The Red River Gang won't wait long. Their pattern suggests they strike within days of selecting a target. His instincts tell him they'll likely move soon, probably targeting multiple businesses in quick succession before disappearing into the territory's vast wilderness. The question isn't whether he can stop them. His skills, honed through years of undercover work and high-stakes operations, remain sharp despite his attempt at retirement. The real question is whether he can find a way to protect the town without sacrificing the peaceful life he's built here. Because once Marcus Drake drops his shopkeeper's facade and reveals the Pinkerton agent beneath, there's no going back to quiet afternoons discussing primers with Miss Montgomery or haggling over tobacco prices with Mr. Patterson. As he unlocks the store's front door, Marcus spots Charlie Weber across the street, the boy's face showing evidence of last night's rough handling. Their eyes meet again, and in that moment, Marcus knows his decision has already been made. Some prices are worth paying to keep good people safe. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The morning brings an unusual visitor to the Millbrook General Store. A woman in a well-tailored traveling suit steps through the door, her presence immediately commanding attention. Catherine Kate Hawkins carries herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to dangerous situations, though only the most observant would notice the slight bulge of a derringer beneath her jacket. "I hear you stock the finest tobacco in the territory, Mr. Drake," she announces, though her eyes scan the store with professional interest. Marcus recognizes the technique, establishing a cover story while assessing the terrain. He's used it himself countless times. "Our selection is modest but carefully chosen," he responds carefully, noting how she positions herself with a clear view of both exits. "Though I suspect you're not here for tobacco, Agent Hawkins." A slight smile crosses her face. "The agency said you were sharp, sharper than most." She moves closer to the counter, lowering her voice. "The Red River Gang has graduated from simple robbery to something more dangerous. 3 weeks ago, they hit a bank in Dakota Territory, left 5 dead, including 2 children. The news settles heavily in Marcus's stomach. Kate continues, pulling a folded newspaper from her bag. They've started working with someone new, a former military demolitions expert. They're not just taking money anymore. They're sending messages, creating terror. Before their conversation can continue, the store's bell chimes again. This time it's Thomas "Hawk" Morrison, Millbrook Valley's resident tracker and hunter. At 50, Hawk's weathered face and keen eyes tell stories of decades spent reading the wilderness. He's also one of the few people in town who makes Marcus wonder if his cover isn't as solid as he thinks. Interesting times we're living in, Hawk comments, setting his weekly order of supplies on the counter. Saw some mighty peculiar tracks out by Eagle Creek yesterday. 5 riders, moving fast, trying to stay hidden. Reminded me of patterns I used to track during the war. Marcus begins gathering Hawk's usual items, coffee, ammunition, preserved meat, while processing this new information. Eagle Creek lies just 3 miles outside town, offering perfect cover for a gang planning their approach. Kate, maintaining her customer facade, examines a shelf of canned goods while listening intently. Marcus notices how Hawk studies her reflection in the store's window, his casual stance belying his alertness. The morning's revelations are interrupted by the arrival of Judge Augustus Clayton, accompanied by his clerk, Michael Chen, Mrs. Chen's eldest son. The judge, despite his advanced age, remains one of Millbrook Valley's most formidable figures. His jurisdiction covers 3 counties, and his reputation for harsh sentences has made him numerous enemies. Quite the gathering we have here, the judge observes, his experienced eyes taking in the scene. Mr. Drake, I trust you received those legal volumes I ordered. Before Marcus can respond, a commotion erupts outside. Through the window, they witness 2 of the strangers from the saloon harassing Eleanor Burke as she delivers her morning bread. One of them, deliberately knocking her basket aside, creates a scene that draws a small crowd. Marcus moves toward the door, but Kate's hand on his arm stops him. "Your cover," she whispers. Instead, they watch as Hawk steps outside, his approach causing the troublemakers to reassess their behavior. There's something in the tracker's stance that suggests he's handled similar situations before. As the crowd disperses, Michael Chen remains behind, helping Eleanor gather her scattered bread. The young clerk's movements are precise, almost military in their efficiency. Marcus recalls rumors about Michael serving with an elite unit during the recent Apache campaigns, though the young man never speaks of his past. Back inside the store, Judge Clayton draws Marcus aside, ostensibly to discuss his book order. "Tell me, Mr. Drake," he says quietly, "what does a former Pinkerton make of our current situation?" The question catches Marcus off guard, though he maintains his composed exterior. "I'm just a shopkeeper, Your Honor." The judge's smile holds no humor. "And I'm just a simple country justice. Let's not play games, son. I've signed enough warrants for Alan Pinkerton to recognize his people. Whatever's coming, this town needs to be ready." Their conversation is interrupted by the return of Deputy Buck, this time accompanied by Marshal Hayes. The Marshal, a veteran of both the Civil War and decades of frontier law enforcement, carries his authority with quiet confidence. However, today there's tension in his bearing that Marcus hasn't seen before. "Judge Clayton," Hayes nods respectfully. "Might I have a word? Privately?" The 2 men move to a corner of the store, their hushed conversation punctuated by grave expressions. Kate uses the opportunity to share more information with Marcus, the gang's demolitions expert. He has a personal vendetta against judges. Lost his family in a mining dispute ruling 10 years ago. Clayton could be a target. The implications are clear. The Red River Gang isn't just planning a simple robbery. They're orchestrating something bigger, something designed to tear apart the fabric of frontier law and order. As the morning progresses, more of the town's key figures pass through the store. Reverend Samuel White, whose church doubles as a meeting hall and potential refuge if trouble comes. Dr. Sarah Blackwood, who served as an army surgeon and knows more about bullet wounds than she cares to discuss. Even Mayor Thomas Greenwich makes an appearance, though his nervous demeanor suggests he's more likely to hinder than help in a crisis. By midday, Marcus has observed a subtle shift in the town's atmosphere. Those who can read the signs are preparing, in their own ways, for whatever approaches. Hawk checks his rifle's action while purchasing ammunition. Michael Chen discusses building repairs with the mayor, casually mentioning the sturdy nature of the courthouse basement. Dr. Blackwood orders extra medical supplies, her eyes meeting Marcus's with grim understanding. Kate remains in the store, maintaining her customer pretense while gathering intelligence. Her presence confirms what Marcus already suspects. The agency considers the situation grave enough to risk sending one of their best operatives into potentially compromised territory. As the afternoon sun casts long shadows through the store's windows, Marcus spots Charlie Webber again, this time accompanying his father Edward, the telegraph operator. The boy's face shows fresh bruising, but his eyes are determined as he hands Marcus a carefully folded note. The message inside, encoded in a simple cipher Marcus recognizes from his Pinkerton days, is brief but alarming. Full gang assembled at Eagle Creek. 15 riders, military-grade explosives confirmed. Judge Clayton primary target, town secondary, 48 hours maximum. Edward Webber meets Marcus's gaze with quiet resolve. The telegraph operator's network of contacts makes him one of the territory's best-informed men, and his son's courage in gathering intelligence despite last night's rough handling speaks to the family's character. As the day draws to a close, Marcus finds himself at the center of a web of capable individuals, each bringing their own skills and resources to the approaching conflict. The question is no longer whether he'll need to break his cover, but how best to coordinate these assets while maintaining the element of surprise. Kate departs with the evening stage, her role as an advanced scout complete. But before leaving, she passes Marcus a familiar object, a Pinkerton badge polished and ready for service. "The agency never accepted your resignation," she says simply. "They just gave you the space you needed. Time's up, Marcus. These people need the man you really are." Sunrise brings an unusual stillness to Millbrook Valley. The morning stage arrives, empty save for a single package addressed to Marcus Drake. Inside, he finds a worn leather journal, its pages filled with detailed accounts of the Red River Gang's previous attacks. The sender's identity is clear to him: standard agency protocol for sharing sensitive intelligence. The journal's final entry describes a pattern he hadn't noticed before. Each major attack was preceded by a smaller incident, designed to test local law enforcement's response time and capabilities. As Marcus processes this information, gunshots shatter the morning calm. The sound comes from the direction of Millbrook's only bank, where elderly Mr. Whitaker is opening for the day. Marcus moves to his store's window, watching as 3 riders, none of them the men from yesterday, fire into the air, causing panic in the street. Their actions seem random, chaotic, but Marcus recognizes the calculated nature of their performance. Through the chaos, Marcus spots Michael Chen moving purposefully along the building's shadow, his military training evident in his efficient movements. The young clerk positions himself to observe the riders while remaining unseen, likely gathering intelligence for Judge Clayton. The gang members' true purpose becomes clear when Marshal Hayes and his deputies respond. Marcus times their arrival. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The riders flee immediately, having achieved their objective. They now know exactly how long they have to work with when the real attack comes. But the morning's events aren't over. As the crowd disperses and the marshal organizes a pursuit, the gang's demolitions expert makes his move. Marcus nearly misses it. A slight figure in workman's clothes, planting something near the courthouse. Foundation, while everyone's attention is directed elsewhere, Alexander Powder, Wilson, the man Kate had warned about, proves more subtle than his explosive reputation suggests. His movements are precise, professional, betraying his military background. Only someone with Marcus's training would notice the careful measuring of distances, the strategic placement of what must be test charges. Inside the store, Hawk appears, silently at Marcus's side, his keen eyes having caught the same details. "Reminds me of Fort Laramie 78, the tracker murmurs. Apaches used a diversion while their scouts mapped the garrison's response patterns. The comparison is apt, though Marcus suspects Hawk's role in that incident might have been more complex than he's letting on. The morning's tension is suddenly amplified by screams from the saloon. One of the gang members, liquored up despite the early hour, has cornered Sarah Montgomery. The schoolteacher's usual route to the schoolhouse takes her past the saloon, a path she's walked safely for years until now. Marcus moves to intervene, but Judge Clayton's clerk reaches the scene first. Michael Chen's response is measured but effective. He doesn't draw a weapon or throw a punch. Instead, he positions himself between Sarah and her harasser, his stance and bearing projecting calm authority. "My father," Michael states clearly, "sits on the Territorial Governor's Advisory Council. Any action against citizens of this town will be reported directly to his office." The claim is pure fabrication. Mrs. Chen runs a laundry, not political counsels, but Michael delivers it with such conviction that the drunk gangster hesitates. This moment of uncertainty is all Dr. Sarah Blackwood needs. Approaching, with her medical bag, she calls out, "Mr. Chen, is this the patient you mentioned, the one with the highly contagious skin condition?" Her voice carries clearly across the street, causing the gangster to stumble backward. This incident diffuses without violence, but Marcus recognizes it for what it is, another test, this one gauging the townspeople's resilience and resourcefulness. The Red River Gang isn't just mapping physical responses, they're assessing the human element, identifying potential threats and weaknesses. By midday, the town buzzes with nervous energy. The telegraph office sees unusual traffic as Edward Weber transmits and receives messages at an increased rate. Marcus intercepts Charlie making one of his deliveries, noting how the boy's routes seem designed to provide maximum observation opportunities of the gang's movements. The Weber family's intelligence network proves its worth when Charlie delivers. His next message: explosives cached in abandoned Collins mine, 15 crates, military grade, stop. Second cache location unknown, stop. Gang split between Eagle Creek and Palmer Ridge, stop. Marcus remembers the Collins mine from his Pinkerton days, a failed silver operation 3 miles north of town. Its location would give the gang a perfect staging area, with multiple escape routes through the surrounding hills. More concerning is the mention of a second cache. Wilson is too experienced to keep all his resources in one location. The afternoon brings another calculated incident. 2 gang members enter Marcus's store, their manner openly hostile. They're different from the morning's riders. These men carry themselves with the hard confidence of experienced killers. One of them, a scarred giant introducing himself as Butcher, makes a show of examining the store's layout. "Nice place," Butcher comments, running a finger along the counter's edge. "Shame if something were to happen to it." The threat is cliché, but the way his partner positions himself near the back door shows professional training. Marcus maintains his shopkeeper's demeanor, though his mind catalogues every detail. Butcher favors his left side, suggesting a previous injury. His partner's boots are a military issue, supporting Kate's intelligence about former soldiers in the gang's ranks. Their real purpose becomes clear when Judge Clayton enters, accompanied by Michael Chen. The gang members immediately focus on the judge, their casual browsing becoming more purposeful. They're confirming the layout for a future operation, using the threat to Marcus's store as cover for surveillance. Clayton plays his role perfectly, appearing as nothing more than an elderly justice making his daily rounds. But Marcus notices how Michael positions himself, ready to shield the judge if needed. The clerk's hand never strays toward a weapon, but his stance suggests he knows exactly how to reach one. The gang members leave without incident, but their visit changes the atmosphere in the store. Regular customers become scarce as word spreads. Those who do enter move quickly, making their purchases with nervous efficiency. The town's pulse quickens, sensing the approaching storm. As evening approaches, Marcus receives an unexpected visitor. Mayor Greenwich, his usual political bluster replaced by genuine fear, brings disturbing news. "They approached me," he whispers, glancing nervously at the windows. "Offered a deal. Said if I ensure the marshal and his deputies are occupied Friday night, they'll spare the town itself. Focus only on the courthouse and bank." The mayor's confession confirms Marcus's suspicions about the timing. Friday nights, the marshal traditionally posts extra deputies near the saloons, managing the weekly influx of ranch hands and miners. The gang plans to exploit this predictable pattern. But Greenwich isn't finished. "There's more," he continues, his voice shaking. "They know about Judge Clayton's special session on Saturday. Some sort of high-profile case. They specifically mentioned making an example. Marcus knows the case, a dispute between the railroad and local landowners, with Clayton set to rule on property rights that could affect the entire territory. A violent disruption wouldn't just terrorize Millbrook Valley, it would send shockwaves through the region's entire legal system. The sun sets on a town unknowingly perched on the edge of chaos. Marcus uses the evening lull to examine the Pinkerton badge Kate left behind. Its weight is familiar in his hand, a reminder of responsibilities he thought he'd left behind. But as he studies the store's ledger, another pattern emerges. One that might give them an advantage. The Red River Gang's careful planning has revealed their own predictability. Like all professionals, they follow established protocols. Marcus has seen it in their surveillance, their testing of responses, their coordination of resources. Now, that same professionalism might be turned against them. In the growing darkness, Marcus begins his own preparations. Tomorrow will require careful staging, positioning assets without revealing their strength. The gang expects to face a simple frontier town. Instead, they'll encounter a carefully orchestrated resistance led by a man who spent years studying exactly how organizations like theirs operate. As night falls completely, Marcus catches a glimpse of Hawk moving silently through the shadows, likely heading to scout the Collins mine. Somewhere in town, Michael Chen is probably reviewing building plans with Judge Clayton, while Dr. Blackwood prepares her surgery for casualties she hopes won't come. The pieces are in place. The stage is set, and in a small store at the heart of Millbrook Valley, a former Pinkerton agent prepares to step back into a role he never truly left behind. Later that evening, Marcus observes an intriguing scene from his window above the bakery. Reverend White, despite the late hour, leads an unusual number of parishioners into the church for what he claims is a prayer meeting. Among them, Marcus recognizes several faces, veterans from the recent Apache campaigns, former lawmen who'd settled in the valley, and even a few ranch hands known for their skills with a rifle rather than their religious devotion. The church's bell tower, Marcus notes, offers an excellent vantage point over both the courthouse and the bank. Its sturdy stone walls could serve as a fortress if needed. The Reverend, it seems, understands that faith sometimes requires the backing of more earthly deterrents. A soft knock at his door reveals Eleanor Burke, carrying not her usual evening bread, but a detailed map of the town's root cellars and underground storage spaces. "These connect most of the buildings on Main Street," she explains quietly. "My Harold, God rest his soul, helped dig many of them, said a town needs its secrets. The network of cellars could provide crucial escape routes or strategic positions if the coming conflict turns ugly. Marcus's attention is drawn to movement near the telegraph office. Edward Weber works late into the night, his telegraph key clicking steadily. Through his open window, Marcus catches fragments of coded messages, reports flowing in from Weber's network of contacts throughout the territory. Each piece of intelligence helps complete the puzzle of the Red River Gang's true capabilities and intentions. The night brings another unexpected visitor, Dr. Blackwood, her medical bag containing more than just standard supplies. Army surplus, she explains, laying out several compact field surgery kits. From my days with the 7th Cavalry, never thought I'd need them again, but... She trails off, her expression grim. I've seen what explosives can do to a town. Better to be prepared. As midnight approaches, Marcus catches sight of Charlie Weber making one final delivery run. The boy moves differently now, more cautiously, but with purpose. His previous encounters with the gang haven't cowed him. Instead, they've taught him how to move unnoticed through his own town. In his own way, the youngest Weber is becoming as much an operative as any Pinkerton agent. Marcus spends the final hours before dawn, organizing his thoughts and intelligence in a way his Pinkerton training taught him. He creates a mental map of the town's defensive capabilities. The church and its volunteer congregation provide high ground and covering fire. The root cellars offer escape routes and covert movement. The telegraph office maintains communications and intelligence. The doctor's surgery stands ready for casualties. Even the bakery below, with its large ovens and access to water, could serve as both commissary and aid station. But it's the human elements that truly matter. Judge Clayton, whose rigid adherence to law masks a strategic mind. Michael Chen, whose military training reveals itself in subtle ways. Hawk, whose tracking skills suggest operations far more complex than simple hunting. Dr. Blackwood, who carries the memory of battlefield medicine in her steady hands. And the Webers, father and son, whose courage and connections make them the town's nervous system. These aren't just townspeople preparing to defend their home. Whether they know it or not, they're elements of an operation coming together with the precision Marcus remembers from his most successful Pinkerton missions. The Red River Gang expects to find a vulnerable frontier town. Instead, they're riding into a carefully prepared defense, organized by a man who spent years studying and dismantling operations exactly like theirs. As the first light of dawn begins to color the eastern sky, Marcus finally allows himself a few hours of rest. Tomorrow will require all his skills, not just the tactical abilities that made him an elite Pinkerton, but the understanding of human nature that helped him build his cover as a simple shopkeeper. The coming conflict will test not just the town's defenses, but its character. In his experience, it's not always the strongest position or the best armed fighter that determines victory. Sometimes, it's the quiet strength of people standing together, each playing their part in a plan they may not fully understand, but instinctively. No is right. Marcus drifts off to sleep with one final thought. The Red River Gang isn't just facing a former Pinkerton agent. They're facing an entire town that, in its own way, has become as professional and dedicated as any agent he's ever known. And that might make all the difference in the coming storm. His rest is interrupted by a subtle pattern of taps against his window. 3 quick, 2 slow, a rhythm he hasn't heard since his Pinkerton days. Outside, perched precariously on the bakery's narrow ledge, Hawk signals urgently for entry. The tracker's usually composed demeanor shows signs of strain. Found something at the Collins mine you need to see, Hawk whispers, unrolling a rough sketch on Marcus's table. The drawing shows the mine's layout, with recent additions marked in red. They've modified the support structures. Wilson's work. I'd stake my reputation on it. Those aren't just demolition charges they're placing. They're turning the entire mine into a weapon. Marcus studies the sketch, his trained eye catching details that confirm his worst fears. The explosive placement isn't random. It's calculated to create a chain reaction. If detonated, the resulting collapse could destabilize the entire hillside. Above Millbrook Valley, there's more, Hawk continues, pulling a torn piece of paper from his coat. Found this in their camp. Partial supply list. The document, written in a precise military hand, includes quantities that make Marcus's blood run cold. This isn't just about robbing a bank or intimidating a judge. The gang is preparing for something far more devastating. A soft knock at the door reveals Eleanor Burke again, this time accompanied by Mrs. Chen. The two women, despite their different backgrounds, share the same determined expression. "The laundry girls hear things," Mrs. Chen states simply. "Men talk too much when they think we're just washing their clothes." She produces a small notebook filled with Chinese characters, which she translates methodically. The information is a goldmine. Snippets of conversation, details about weapons, even fragments of the gang's timetable. Eleanor adds her own intelligence. "The morning bread delivery takes me past the saloon where they're staying. They've been drinking heavily, but not all of them. Some stay completely sober, watching everything. Military discipline, if you ask me." Marcus absorbs this new information, adding it to his mental map of the situation. The gang's plan is becoming clearer and more alarming. They're not just planning to rob the bank during Judge Clayton's special session. They're setting up a multi-layered attack designed to completely destroy Millbrook Valley's authority structure and its will to resist. The conversation is interrupted by the sound of horses on Main Street. Through the window, they observe 3 riders moving slowly past the courthouse. Even in the dim light, Marcus recognizes Wilson's distinctive silhouette among them. The demolitions expert is doing his own late-night reconnaissance. Mrs. Chen melts away into the shadows with practiced ease, while Eleanor returns to her bakery below. Hawk lingers only long enough to share one final piece of information. They've posted men on the high ridge, east of town. Professional spotters, with good glass. They're watching everything. After they leave, Marcus reviews his mental inventory of the town's assets through this new lens. The church's bell tower is now compromised. Any movement there would be spotted instantly. The route cellars become more crucial as covered movement routes. The Weber's intelligence network needs to be warned about the observers. He's considering these complications when he notices an unusual pattern in the bakery's overnight baking schedule. Eleanor normally starts her ovens at 4 a.m., but tonight they're burning at irregular intervals. It takes him a moment to recognize it. She's using the smoke signals to communicate with someone in the hills. This realization leads to others. Dr. Blackwood's late-night house calls follow a too precise pattern. The Reverend's prayer meetings coincide too perfectly with gang movements. Michael Chen's errands for Judge Clayton create a comprehensive map of the gang's positions. The town hasn't just been preparing for a fight, it's been conducting sophisticated counterintelligence operations, probably coordinated through the Weber family's telegraph network. Each resident played their part, building a complex web of surveillance and communication that even Marcus, with his Pinkerton training, hadn't fully appreciated. A memory surfaces from his agency days, a senior operative's warning about the danger of underestimating civilian resources. "Every town has its own network," the old man had said. "The trick isn't building one from scratch, it's recognizing and utilizing what's already there." The pre-dawn hours bring more subtle signs of the town's hidden strengths. A group of ranch hands arrives early for supplies, their wagons loaded with suspicious extra weight. The blacksmith's forge burns hot, though no horses wait for shoeing. Young women gather for early morning choir practice, their hymn books concealing maps and messages. Marcus watches it all from his window, his shopkeeper's facade allowing him to observe without drawing attention. The Red River Gang's spotters on the ridge are watching a town going about its normal business. They can't see the layers of preparation and coordination happening just below the surface. As the eastern sky begins to lighten, Marcus makes one final note in his own journal. Tomorrow, he'll open his store as usual. He'll serve customers, track inventory, and maintain the appearance of routine. But now he understands that he's not just a former Pinkerton agent preparing to defend a town. He's become part of something larger, a community that's transformed itself into an operational unit more sophisticated than any he encountered in his agency days. The Red River Gang is about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating frontier towns and the hidden strengths they harbor. Dawn breaks over Millbrook Valley, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. From the ridge, the gang's spotters observe what appears to be a typical morning in a quiet frontier town. They don't see the shadows moving purposefully through root cellars, the subtle signals passed between neighbors, or the quiet determination behind every seemingly routine action. In a few hours, Marcus will pin on his Pinkerton badge and step back into a familiar role, but now he knows he won't be standing alone. An entire town stands with him, each resident a vital part of an operation none of them ever trained for, but all of them instinctively understand. The coming confrontation will test not just their preparations, but the very bonds that hold their community together. The morning brings an unexpected change in the Red River Gang's pattern. Their usual surveillance of the town square is absent, replaced by an eerie quiet that sets Marcus's nerves on edge. Through his store window, he watches Butcher and two unfamiliar men load supplies into a wagon, enough for an extended operation. Sarah Montgomery bursts into the store, her usual composure shattered. "They're at the school," she manages between breaths. "3 of them. They've barred the doors with the children inside." The schoolhouse, Marcus realizes, offers a perfect vantage point over both the bank and courthouse. More importantly, it provides the gang with hostages. Before Marcus, he can respond, Judge Clayton appears at his side, having entered through the root cellar entrance Eleanor showed him. "This changes everything," the judge states grimly. "We need help, professional help. The Territory Marshal's office has a special unit, former Army scouts. They're based in Fort McKenzie." 3 days' ride, Marcus responds, already calculating. Too long. He knows the unit Clayton mentions. He'd worked with them during his Pinkerton days. Excellent men, but their arrival would come too late to prevent whatever the gang has planned. "There's another option," Michael Chen interjects, emerging from the back room where he'd been inventorying ammunition. "My former commanding officer from the Apache campaigns, Colonel James Harrison. He maintains a private force, mainly veterans, at his ranch near Thunder Creek, day's ride at most." Marcus studies the young Clerk with new understanding. The military precision in his movements suddenly makes sense. He'd served under Harrison, known in Pinkerton circles as one of the most effective irregular warfare commanders on the frontier. Harrison's not cheap, Marcus notes, and he doesn't involve his men without good reason. Michael produces a letter from his coat. Already wrote to him, told him about Wilson's explosives, the modified mine works. Harrison has personal experience with that kind of warfare, lost half his command to a rigged canyon during the Apache Wars. The pieces click into place. Wilson's military background, his expertise with explosives, he'd been on the other side of that canyon. His vendetta against frontier justice suddenly carries deeper implications. Their planning session is interrupted by Charlie Weber, arriving through the root cellar network. The boy's face is flushed with exertion. "Telegraph lines are cut," he reports. "Pa says they did it smart, made it look like natural wear. Could take days to find all the breaks." Marcus moves to his hidden wall safe, removing a small box he'd hoped never to open again. Inside lies an encrypted codebook, standard, Pinkerton issue for emergency communications. "Get this to your father," he tells Charlie. "He'll find frequencies listed inside. Short-range telegraph stations, emergency channels. The agency maintains them throughout the territory." Judge Clayton raises an eyebrow. "Thought you'd left the agency behind." "They never leave anything behind," Marcus responds, the weight of his hidden badge suddenly noticeable against his chest. "There's always a contingency." The morning progresses with calculated movements disguised as normal activity. Dr. Blackwood makes her rounds, secretly assessing which buildings could serve as emergency medical stations. Reverend White's prayer meetings continue, positioning armed volunteers under the guise of spiritual gatherings. A subtle tap at the store's back window draws Marcus's attention. Hawk signals urgently from the alley. "Riders coming," he reports. Once inside, not gang members, different sort, professional, military bearing. His expression shows concern, but something's wrong about them. Through his spyglass, Marcus observes the approaching group. 6 riders, moving with tactical precision, their horses fresh despite the apparent dust of travel. Their weapons are military issues, their gear well maintained. Everything about them suggests exactly the kind of help they need. Except they're too clean, Marcus murmurs, noting details only years of undercover work would reveal. Dust is surface, only clothes underneath are fresh. These men haven't been riding long. His mind races through implications. They're not reinforcements. They're part of the gang, probably Wilson's own unit from his military days. The realization adds another layer to the gang's strategy. By cutting the telegraph lines and blocking normal communications, they've created a situation where any offer of help would be eagerly accepted. The arrival of apparent military reinforcements would be welcomed without question. "They're building a Trojan horse," Judge Clayton observes grimly. "Get their men inside our defenses before we realize what's happening." The situation demands immediate response, but direct confrontation would reveal how much they know. Marcus makes a quick decision. "Mrs. Chen," he calls to where she's been quietly organizing supplies. "Time to send those laundry wagons out." The Chinese woman nods, understanding immediately. Within minutes, her daughters begin their usual rounds, collecting laundry from the saloon where most of the gang stays. But today, their wagons take a route that forces the approaching riders to either reveal their ruse by ignoring normal military protocol or play their parts by responding to the civilian traffic. The ploy works. The riders maintain their act, politely directing the laundry wagons to alternative routes. In doing so, they reveal their unfamiliarity with the town's layout. No experienced military unit would redirect civilian traffic into what locals know is a dead end. While this drama plays out on the streets, Eleanor Burke puts her bakery's ovens to strategic use. The smoke signals carry messages to scattered ranches and homesteads, warning them about the false reinforcements. By sundown, the word will have spread throughout the valley. Any approaching help should be treated with suspicion. Marcus uses the commotion to send Charlie Weber on another mission. The boy departs through the root cellars with a message for Colonel Harrison, this one encoded using Marcus's old Pinkerton ciphers. Even if intercepted, it would appear to be ordinary business correspondence about store supplies. The afternoon brings new complications. The military unit makes a show of inspecting the town's defenses, their presence preventing Marcus and his allies from completing their own preparations. More worryingly, they pay particular attention to the school, exchanging signals with the men holding the children. Sarah Montgomery, displaying remarkable composure, turns this attention to advantage. She approaches the unit's commander with a schoolteacher's natural concern for her pupils. Her questions about their military experience and background seem perfectly natural, while providing valuable intelligence about their true identities. As evening approaches, Marcus receives an unexpected visitor. Mayor Greenwich, still struggling. with his conscience, brings news that makes the situation even more urgent. They're not just planning to rob the bank during the judge's special session, he reveals. Wilson designed the explosives to collapse specific buildings. The debris will block the main streets, trapping everyone inside the kill zone. The mayor's information confirms Marcus's worst fears. The Red River Gang isn't just planning a robbery or an assassination. They're preparing to destroy the entire town, using the explosion at the Collins mine to trigger a cascade of destruction that will bury Millbrook Valley under tons of rock and rubble. Judge Clayton takes the news with judicial calm. They're not just after the money or even revenge against me. They want to erase us, make an example that will be remembered throughout the territory. The situation demands immediate action, but their options are limited. The fake military unit watches every movement in town. The telegraph lines remain cut. The school children are still hostages. And somewhere in the surrounding hills, Wilson's men continue their deadly preparations at the Collins mine. As night falls, Marcus makes his way to the root cellar beneath his store. In the dim lamplight, he meets with his core group of allies. Judge Clayton, Michael Chen, Hawk, Dr. Blackwood, and the others listen intently as he outlines their options. "We can't wait for outside help," he concludes. "Even if Harrison's men arrive in time, they'll be walking into a trap. We need to act now, using what we have." He looks around the cellar at the determined faces. The Red River Gang thinks they're dealing with simple townspeople. Time to show them how wrong they are. Dr. Blackwood pulls a folded map from her medical bag, spreading it across a barrel. "The schoolhouse has a weakness they don't know about." She points to a specific location. "During the typhoid outbreak last winter, we dug a temporary quarantine tunnel. It's still there, hidden behind storage crates in the cellar." Michael Chen studies the map intently. The children would need a distraction to use it. The gang members upstairs are experienced. They'll notice any unusual movement. His military training shows as he analyzes angles of vision and response times. "I might have something for that," Eleanor Burke interjects. She retrieves a small pouch from her apron pocket. "Powdered ghost pepper. Got it from Mrs. Chen's supplier. One pinch in a hot stove, and the whole building will need to be evacuated." Marcus nods appreciatively. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective, but the children are only part of the problem. We still need to deal with Wilson's explosives. The fake military unit has every official building under surveillance. Hawk moves to the map, his finger tracing lines only he can see. "Been watching their watchers. They're professional, but they're not local. Don't know the land like we do. There's a series of old deer trails leading to the Collins mine, impossible to spot unless you know where to look. Those trails won't help if Wilson has the mine rigged to blow at the first sign of interference," Judge Clayton points out. "The concern is valid. The demolition expert's reputation for deadly thoroughness is well earned." A quiet voice speaks up from the shadows. Charlie Weber, who'd returned from his mission, steps forward. "The explosives need triggers. Pa says all that military-grade stuff uses special blasting caps. Remove those, the rest is just dead weight." Marcus looks at the boy with newfound respect. Edward Weber had clearly taught his son more than just telegraph operations. "We'd need to get close enough to identify the firing mechanisms without being spotted." Already done, Charlie produces a folded paper from his jacket. "Had a good look while delivering a false message from their spotters. Draw everything I saw." The rough sketch shows detailed placement of guards, equipment, and most importantly, the main detonator setup. Mrs. Chen, who'd been quietly listening, adds her own intelligence. "My girls found blasting cap boxes while doing laundry. They're German-made, very specific types, need special handling. One sharp knock in the wrong place." She leaves the implication hanging. The group falls into focused discussion, each member contributing their knowledge and resources. Marcus watches them work, remembering similar planning sessions from his Pinkerton days. But this is different. These aren't trained agents or lawmen. They're ordinary people, rising to an extraordinary challenge. A soft tapping from above interrupts their planning. Using the store's floorboards as a telegraph, Sarah Montgomery signals new information about the school situation. The gang members are getting careless, growing overconfident in their control. They've started taking breaks, leaving only 2 men to watch the children at any time. We need to coordinate multiple operations, Marcus summarizes. The school, the mine, and dealing with the fake military unit, all while maintaining our normal routines to avoid suspicion. He looks at each person in turn. One mistake, and the whole town pays the price. Judge Clayton straightens his judicial robes, a gesture that seems oddly appropriate in the cramped cellar. Then we make sure there are no mistakes. Every person here has something at stake, something worth fighting for. The planning continues. Late into the night, messages flow through the root cellar network, coordinating with other trusted townspeople. Dr. Blackwood prepares medical caches in strategic locations. Reverend White's congregation rehearses their response plans under the cover of evening hymn practice. As the group finally disperses, using various hidden exits to avoid being seen together, Marcus reflects on the transformation he's witnessing. The Red River Gang chose Millbrook Valley, believing it to be an easy target, a simple frontier town with more wealth than protection. Instead, they've unwittingly triggered the creation of something remarkable. Every general store has its secrets, every shopkeeper their hidden strengths. Marcus had chosen this cover because it offered anonymity, a chance to leave his Pinkerton life behind. Now he realizes that running the store has given him something more valuable, a position at the heart of a community that, when threatened, reveals itself to be as formidable as any professional organization he's known. Dawn approaches, bringing with it the beginning of their most dangerous gambit. The fake military unit will expect to see normal morning routines. The baker starting her ovens, the school teacher walking to work, the storekeeper checking his inventory. But beneath this peaceful surface, Millbrook Valley prepares for a battle that will determine not just its survival, but its very soul. Marcus returns to his room above the bakery, knowing sleep will be impossible. Tomorrow, he'll need every skill from his Pinkerton days. But more importantly, he'll need to trust in the hidden strengths of these townspeople who've become more than just neighbors. They've become his team, his backup, his partners in an operation none of them chose. But all of them are determined to see through. The night wind carries the distant howl of a coyote, or perhaps one of Hawk's signals to his scouts in the hills. Somewhere in town, Charlie Weber taps out encoded messages on his father's telegraph. Sarah Montgomery prepares her students for what might be their most important lesson. And in hidden root cellars throughout Millbrook Valley, ordinary citizens prepare to defend their home with extraordinary courage. Marcus places his Pinkerton badge on the bedside table, its silver surface catching the first hint of dawn. Tomorrow, he'll wear it openly again. But now he understands. It's not the badge that makes the agent. It's the ability to see the potential in others, to weave individual strengths into a unified force. The Red River Gang is about to learn that the hardest targets are often the ones that appear the softest, and the most dangerous opponents are those who have everything to lose. A subtle knock at his door reveals Mrs. Chen's youngest daughter, Lisa, clutching a bundle of freshly laundered clothes. But beneath the mundane delivery lies crucial intelligence. The fake soldiers, she whispers in perfect English, belying her usual broken speech in public. They're carrying extra weapons, hidden in their bedrolls, new Winchesters, still in Cosmoline. This detail triggers Marcus's memory of a Pinkerton bulletin from months ago, a major weapons shipment hijacked near the Dakota Territory. The Red River Gang isn't just planning to destroy Millbrook Valley. They're using it as a distribution point for stolen military arms. His contemplation is interrupted by an urgent signal through the floorboards. 3 long taps, 2 short. Emergency message from the telegraph office. Marcus descends to Eleanor's bakery, where Edward Weber himself waits in the shadows, his face grave. Just intercepted a partial message on the emergency frequency, Weber reports, handing over a slip of paper. Someone's using old military ciphers. Couldn't decode it all, but caught 2 phrases, powder set and angel's wings. Marcus's blood runs cold. Angel's wings was a military code phrase from the Apache Wars, used to designate operations involving civilian casualties. Wilson isn't just planning to destroy buildings, he's orchestrating a massacre. The night brings more revelations. Hawk returns from another scouting mission, this time with physical evidence. Discarded blasting wire and timing mechanisms found near the mine. But it's what he didn't find that worries Marcus. No standard demolition patterns, Hawk explains, sketching in the dust on the floor. Wilson's rigging something more complex, multiple trigger points, redundant systems, and there's evidence of recent digging beneath the schoolhouse foundation. The implications are staggering. The school isn't just a hostage location, it's part of the demolition network. Wilson has likely run blast lines through Millbrook Valley's own root cellar system, turning the town's secret strength into a potential weakness. Dr. Blackwood, arriving for what appears to be a routine medical check, brings her own concerning observations. The fake unit's commander has a fresh surgery scar, left shoulder, military field procedure. Matches reports of an injury sustained by Wilson's second-in-command during their last bank robbery. Marcus processes this information while maintaining his shopkeeper's routine, serving late-night customers who need emergency supplies. Each transaction becomes an opportunity to pass messages, coordinate movements, position assets. Through his store window, he observes the fake military unit performing their security patrols. Their pattern appears random, but reveals deeper purpose to his trained eye. They're systematically mapping the town's defensive positions, identifying key structures, marking fields of fire. A commotion near the saloon draws attention, a seemingly drunk ranch hand stumbling into one of the gang members. But Marcus recognizes Michael Chen's hand in the choreographed chaos. The incident forces the gang member to break character momentarily, revealing a distinctive cavalry sword grip that identifies him as one of Wilson's former military unit. Sarah Montgomery appears with a legitimate request for school supplies, covering her real purpose, delivering an annotated map showing the gang's changing patrol patterns inside the school. She's been tracking their movements, noting their routines, identifying their weaknesses. They're getting comfortable, she reports quietly, while selecting pencils. Growing overconfident. But there's something else. They're preparing the children for something, making them practice evacuation drills. Judge Clayton, making his evening rounds, adds his own insight. They're not just planning to destroy the town. They want to make a statement. The timing of the special session, the presence of prominent landowners and railroad officials. This is about more than revenge. It's about changing the balance of power in the entire territory. As midnight approaches, Marcus calls a final meeting in the root cellar. The town's impromptu resistance network gathers one last time before the coming storm. Each person brings their piece of the puzzle. Eleanor Burke has memorized the gang's meal schedules, identifying windows of opportunity when key members are distracted. Mrs. Chen's laundry network has mapped every weapon cache and escape route. Reverend White's congregation has established clear fields of fire from concealed positions throughout town. Dr. Blackwood has prepared medical stations in the root cellars, with supplies and volunteers ready to treat casualties. The Weber family's telegraph network stands ready to coordinate multiple operations simultaneously. Even young Charlie has memorized the locations of every blasting cap and detonator wire. Marcus surveys this unlikely group of heroes. A baker, a laundress, a schoolteacher, a doctor, a tracker, a clerk, a minister, each bringing their own skills and courage to the fight. The Red River Gang has severely miscalculated. They see Millbrook Valley as just another soft target, a simple frontier. Town ripe for destruction. Instead, they've walked into a trap of their own making. Every aspect of their plan, the hostages, the fake military unit, the complex demolitions, has forced them to extend their presence in town. Each day they spend preparing their grand destruction gives the townspeople more time to prepare their response. Tomorrow, when Wilson and his men make their move, they'll find that their carefully planned operation has been compromised from within. The very people they dismissed as simple townspeople have become their most dangerous opponents. As the group disperses for the last time, Marcus shares a final thought. Remember, we're not just fighting for buildings or money. We're fighting for everything this town represents. The right of good people to live in peace, to build something worth protecting, to stand together against those who would destroy it. Dawn is approaching, and with it, the beginning of a battle that will determine the fate of not just Millbrook Valley, but the very nature of justice on the frontier. Marcus returns to his room, checking his revolver one last time before placing it beside his badge. Tomorrow, a simple storekeeper will become a Pinkerton agent again. But more importantly, an entire town will reveal its true strength. The Red River Gang is about to learn the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the most formidable weapons aren't guns or explosives, but the unshakable bonds between people defending. In their home, dawn paints Millbrook Valley in shades of gold when the Red River Gang makes their first mistake. Two of their men, bristling with unearned confidence, decide to demonstrate their power by roughing up Marcus during his morning store preparations. They've chosen this moment carefully. The street is empty, no witnesses except the fake military unit watching from their posts. "Heard you been asking questions about us," the taller one growls, shoving Marcus against his own storefront. "Time to learn your place, shopkeep." Marcus maintains his mild-mannered facade, even as his trained mind catalogues every detail. The larger man favors his right side, telegraphing his punches. The smaller one carries a knife in his left boot, poorly concealed. Both position themselves like brawlers, not professional fighters. "Gentlemen," Marcus begins, his voice steady. "Perhaps we could—" The first punch comes exactly as he expects, telegraphed by the larger man's shifting weight. Marcus doesn't dodge completely. That would reveal too much. Instead, he moves just enough to transform a knockout blow into a glancing hit, but the gang member's next action changes everything. The smaller one draws his boot knife, its blade catching morning sunlight. "Think it's time we showed this whole town what happens to folks who don't mind their business." Marcus's decision is made in an instant. These men aren't just trying to intimidate him. They're setting an example, planning to leave him bleeding on his own doorstep as a message to the town. The time for maintaining his cover has passed. His response is precisely calculated. A subtle shift in stance, a change in his bearing that transforms the mild-mannered shopkeeper into something else entirely. The larger man notices the change. Too late, his next punch meeting empty air as Marcus moves with fluid efficiency. What follows isn't a brawl, but a demonstration. Marcus disarms the knife wielder with a technique taught exclusively to Pinkerton agents working railway security. The larger man finds himself suddenly airborne, his own momentum used against him in a way that speaks of extensive military training. Within seconds, both attackers lie groaning on the boardwalk, their weapons now in Marcus's possession. He hasn't broken character completely, no need to reveal all his capabilities yet. But he's shown enough to send a message. "Gentlemen," he addresses the fake military unit watching from their posts, "I trust you'll escort your colleagues to Dr. Blackwood. Do remind them that attempting to murder a shopkeeper tends to be bad for business." The incident ripples through Millbrook Valley like a stone, disturbing still water. The gang members, nursing bruised bodies and egos, spin tales of lucky shots and unfair advantages. But their leaders, especially Wilson, recognize the truth. They've uncovered something unexpected in this frontier town. Later that morning, Judge Clayton visits the store, ostensibly to check on Marcus's welfare. "Quite a performance," he observes dryly, "though I suspect we haven't seen your full repertoire." "There's a difference between showing capability and showing everything you're capable of," Marcus responds, arranging merchandise with precise movements that now seem less shopkeeper and more operative. They needed to know they face resistance. They didn't need to know exactly what kind. The judge nods appreciatively. "Care to share some of that history you've been keeping under lock and key? Might help us understand what we're really dealing with." Marcus considers carefully. The time for complete secrecy has passed, but operational security remains crucial. He leads Clayton through the root cellar to Eleanor's bakery, where the oven's noise will cover their conversation. 8 years with the Pinkerton agency," Marcus begins, "specialized in dismantling criminal organizations that targeted railroad interests. The kind of operations that required months of deep cover, infiltrating gangs from the inside." Clayton listens intently as Marcus outlines a career spent in the shadows of frontier justice. Operations in 4 territories, over 30 major cases resolved, countless smaller ones handled quietly. But it's the details about Wilson that really catch the judge's attention. "First encountered him during the Mason County War," Marcus explains. "He was already showing his aptitude for demolitions, but hadn't turned criminal yet. Lost his family in a mining dispute. Judge ruled in favor of the railroad. Mining company evicted homesteaders with excessive force. Wilson's wife and daughter were caught in a house fire during the eviction. And now he's targeting frontier justice itself," Clayton concludes, "using his military experience to wage a private war." "It's more than that," Marcus corrects. "I tracked him for 3 months. After he first went rogue, he's not just after revenge, he's trying to reshape the entire frontier. Every bank he robs, every judge he threatens, it's all part of a larger strategy to undermine authority in the territories." Their conversation is interrupted by Sarah Montgomery's arrival through the bakery's front door. Her presence isn't suspicious. No, she often buys morning bread for her students, but her real purpose is to report on the gang's reaction to the morning's events. "They're angry," she reports quietly, "but also uncertain. The fake military unit has doubled their patrols. Wilson himself came to observe the school, watching everything with different eyes." Marcus processes this information. The morning's demonstration has achieved its purpose, disrupting the gang's confidence while revealing only a fraction of their opposition's true capabilities. But it's also accelerated their timeline. "They'll move sooner now," he predicts. "Can't risk giving us time to organize proper resistance." "Judge, when exactly is that special session scheduled?" "Tomorrow afternoon," Clayton responds. Railroad executives, landowners, territorial officials, all gathering to settle property rights that could affect development across 3 territories. The timing suddenly makes perfect sense. Wilson isn't just planning to destroy a town. He's arranging a demonstration of power that will resonate throughout the frontier. The death of a judge and prominent citizens, the destruction of an entire community, all orchestrated to show that no one is beyond his reach. As the day progresses, Marcus allows more glimpses of his true nature to show through his shopkeeper's facade. The way he moves, his awareness of surroundings, his tactical positioning, all carefully calculated to send messages to both allies and enemies. The fake military unit watches him constantly now, their own cover slipping as they maintain surveillance. Their commander, the man Dr. Blackwood identified by his surgery scar, seems particularly unsettled by this new development. Through the root cellar network, Marcus receives updates from his improvised intelligence network. Mrs. Chen's daughters, report increased activity at the gang's saloon headquarters. Hawk's scouts observe supply wagons being prepared for quick departure. The Weber family's telegraph intercepts suggest coded messages flying between scattered gang members. But it's Charlie Weber who brings the most crucial intelligence. The boy appears at the store's back door as evening approaches, clutching a crumpled paper stolen from Wilson's own room during a message delivery. The document confirms their worst fears. A detailed demolition plan showing not just the Collins mine modifications, but an entire network of charges planted throughout. Millbrook Valley, the schoolhouse, the courthouse, the bank, and key escape routes all rigged to create a cascading destruction that would leave nothing but rubble. Marcus studies the plans with the eye of someone who spent years understanding how organizations like the Red River Gang operate. Wilson's strategy is brilliant in its simplicity. Use the children as hostages to prevent interference, destroy the town's leadership during the special session, then trigger the mine collapse to complete the destruction. But brilliant strategies often contain hidden weaknesses. Marcus's years of undercover work taught him that even the most carefully planned operations have vulnerability points. Moments where everything depends on specific actions happening in precise sequence. As night falls over Millbrook Valley, Marcus makes his final preparations. Tomorrow will require him to be more than just a former Pinkerton agent, more than just a man defending his adopted home. He'll need to become something that Wilson and his gang never expected to find in a simple frontier town. A professional. Opponent who understands not just how to fight them, but how to dismantle their entire operation from within. In his room above the bakery, Marcus cleans his revolver with the precise movements of someone who spent years maintaining weapons. In field conditions, the Pinkerton badge rests on his bedside table, its silver surface reflecting lamplight. Tomorrow, both will be worn openly, but his most powerful weapons aren't the gun or the badge. They're the skills gained through years of undercover work. The ability to read people, predict reactions, understand how criminal organizations think and operate. Wilson has built his plan around the assumption that he's facing simple townspeople. He's about to learn the cost of that misconception. Marcus extinguishes his lamp, the darkness bringing clarity rather than uncertainty. Tomorrow, Millbrook Valley will discover whether a lifetime of clandestine operations can be used to save rather than destroy. And Wilson will learn that sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one who matches your strength, but the one who knows exactly how to turn that strength against you. A soft tap at his window reveals Michael Chen, who brings more than just intelligence. "Found these in Wilson's camp," he whispers, producing a set of military orders. The papers, weathered and creased, detail Wilson's service record, including a crucial detail Marcus had suspected but couldn't confirm. "Special Demolitions Unit," Marcus reads in the dim light. "Assigned to railroad security before the Apache campaigns." The implications are significant. Wilson hadn't just learned about demolitions during his military service. He'd been specifically trained to protect railroad interests from the very types of attacks he now orchestrates. This revelation adds another layer to Wilson's methodology. He's not just using his military training, he's systematically exploiting every security weakness he was once paid to defend. His knowledge of railroad operations, judicial procedures, and territorial law enforcement all come from his time protecting these very institutions. A commotion from the street draws their attention. Through the window, they observe an interesting tableau. The fake military unit's commander engages in what appears to be a casual conversation with Marshal Hayes. But Marcus recognizes the subtle positioning, the carefully orchestrated movements. "There, mapping the Marshal's response patterns," Michael observes, his own military training evident in his analysis. Testing his reaction times, his tactical instincts. More than that, Marcus responds. They're establishing trust. Every friendly interaction makes their presence seem more legitimate. He's seen this technique before. Criminals using authorities' own protocols against it. Their observation is interrupted by an urgent signal through the floorboards. Eleanor Burke needs immediate assistance in the bakery. They find her with Dr. Blackwood treating a wounded man who'd arrived through the root cellar network. One of Hawke's scouts, Eleanor explains as the doctor works, found something at the Collins mine they didn't want found. The scout, despite his injury, insists on delivering his intelligence. Wilson's men aren't just rigging the mine for destruction. They're systematically studying the geological features of the entire valley. Their demolition expert has identified natural fault lines that, if exploited properly, could trigger a cascade of destruction far beyond their explosive charges. He's not just planning to destroy buildings, Marcus realizes. He's going to reshape the entire landscape. His mind races through implications. A properly engineered series of explosions could collapse key terrain features, potentially damaging every structure in the valley. The night brings more revelations. Sarah Montgomery arrives with additional intelligence gathered from her forced interaction with the gang members at the school. The children's evacuation drills aren't just for show. The gang is actually planning to save the students at the last moment. Wilson has a specific timing in mind, she reports. The children will be moved just before the explosions. He wants witnesses, survivors, to tell the story of how Millbrook Valley was erased. Marcus processes this information through the lens of his Pinkerton experience. Wilson isn't just plotting revenge. He's orchestrating a message that will resonate throughout the territories. The survival of the children ensures his statement about the powerlessness of frontier justice will spread far beyond a single destroyed town. As midnight approaches, Judge Clayton makes one final visit, accompanied by an unexpected guest, Mayor Greenwich. The mayor's nervous demeanor has been replaced by grim determination. They approached me again, Greenwich reveals, offered more details about their plans. They don't just want me to divert the marshal's men. They need access to the town's original survey maps, detailed information about underground watercourses, old mine workings, everything. This request reveals another aspect of Wilson's expertise. He's not just using explosives, he's planning to exploit every natural and man-made feature of the landscape. The destruction of Millbrook Valley will be a demonstration of his complete mastery of demolitions. Marcus spends the final hours before dawn reviewing everything his years of undercover work taught him about men like Wilson. Professional demolitions experts develop distinctive patterns, preferences in techniques that become almost like signatures. Understanding these patterns is crucial to predicting and countering their operations. The fake military unit maintains their watch through the night, but Marcus observes subtle changes in their behavior. Their commander seems increasingly uneasy, perhaps recognizing that the morning's incident with the shopkeeper has introduced an unknown variable into their carefully planned operation. Through the root cellar network, Marcus receives one final piece of intelligence. Charlie Weber, making his last rounds of the night, reports overhearing a crucial conversation. Wilson's men aren't just confident, they're absolutely certain of their success because they believe they've accounted for every possible form of resistance. This overconfidence reveals their critical weakness. They've planned for every conventional response: law enforcement, military intervention, civilian resistance. But they haven't planned for someone who understands their methodology from the inside, someone trained to dismantle criminal organizations by exploiting their own operational patterns. As the first hint of dawn colors the eastern sky, Marcus makes his final preparations. His Pinkerton badge and revolver are ready, but more importantly, his mind is focused with the clarity that comes from years of undercover operations. Tomorrow will require more than just skill with a weapon or knowledge. Of tactics, it will require him to think like Wilson, to understand not just the man's plans, but his psychological needs. The demolition expert isn't just seeking revenge or trying to make a statement. He's trying to prove something to himself as much as to the world. And in that need to prove himself, to demonstrate his absolute mastery over the forces of destruction, Wilson has created opportunities that someone with Marcus's training can exploit. Because sometimes the most effective way to counter an opponent isn't to match their strength, but to understand their motivations so completely that you can predict their every move. Marcus watches the sun rise over Millbrook Valley, knowing that by sunset the town will either be destroyed or saved. But more than that, it will serve as the stage for a confrontation between two men who've spent their lives mastering different aspects of frontier justice, one seeking to destroy it, the other determined to prove that it's worth defending. A rapid series of taps through the floorboards interrupts his thoughts. Dr. Blackwood needs to see him immediately. In her surgery, he finds not just the doctor but Hawk as well, examining what appears to be military equipment. Found these hidden in a cache near the Collins mine, Hawk explains, laying out sophisticated surveying tools. Army Corps of Engineers issue. Wilson's not just planning demolitions, he's conducting a full geological survey. Dr. Blackwood points to specific markings on the equipment. These modifications, I saw similar tools during the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. They're designed to identify structural weaknesses in mountain passes. Marcus examines the tools with growing concern. During his Pinkerton days, he'd investigated several cases of railroad sabotage involving similarly modified equipment. The sophistication suggests Wilson isn't working alone. He has access to technical expertise beyond his own considerable skills. Their discussion is interrupted by Sarah Montgomery's arrival through the root cellar. Her usual composed demeanor shows signs of strain. One of the gang members, he was careless with his papers. I saw part of a letter. It mentioned something called Project Carthage. The name triggers a memory from Marcus's deepest undercover work. Project Carthage had been a theoretical military study, plans for completely erasing strategic targets by exploiting natural geological features. The project was abandoned for being too destructive, too difficult to control. Wilson's not just planning to destroy Millbrook Valley, Marcus realizes. He's using it as a proof of concept, a demonstration that Project Carthage is viable. The implications are staggering. If Wilson succeeds, he won't just be destroying one town, he'll be providing a blueprint for systematic destruction that could be used throughout the territories. Every mining town, every railroad settlement would be vulnerable. Through the surgery's window, they observe the fake military unit conducting their morning patrol. Their movements betray increasing professionalism. They're dropping the pretense of being regular army, revealing the specialized training that marks them as Wilson's former demolitions unit. Eleanor Burke arrives with fresh intelligence gathered from her morning deliveries. The gang's saloon headquarters received several unmarked crates overnight. Through careful observation, she noted they required multiple men to move, suggesting heavy equipment. They're not just bringing in explosives, Marcus explains. They're assembling the components for multiple detonation systems. Standard military demolitions protocol. Redundancy is essential for operations of this scale. Judge Clayton joins. They're gathering, his judicial robes concealing a gun belt Marcus recognizes from his Pinkerton days. Specialized equipment issued to agents protecting high-risk targets. Wilson's men have been asking questions about the special session, Clayton reports. Very specific questions about which railroad executives will be attending, their exact arrival times. Marcus begins connecting threads. The railroad executives aren't just collateral damage in Wilson's plan, they're specific targets. Men who, in their pursuit of territorial expansion, might have signed orders similar to those that destroyed Wilson's family. Michael Chen arrives next, his morning errands providing cover for detailed reconnaissance. The fake military unit's commander. I recognized his technique for checking sightlines. He was trained by Colonel Harrison. This revelation adds another layer to Wilson's operation. He's not just recruited his own former demolitions unit. He's gathered men with specific expertise in frontier combat operations. Men who understand both military and civilian response patterns. Through the Root Cellar network, Charlie Weber delivers updated intelligence about the gang's movements. They're systematically testing the town's emergency responses, creating small incidents to observe reaction times and procedures. They're not just mapping physical responses, Marcus explains to his gathered allies. They're creating a psychological profile of the town, understanding how we think, how we react under pressure. Mrs. Chen appears briefly, ostensibly to deliver fresh laundry. Hidden among the clean clothes is a notebook containing transcribed conversations from the gang's quarters. The laundry girls have observed increasing tension between Wilson and his men. Some are growing uneasy about the scale of destruction being planned. This internal conflict presents an opportunity, but Marcus knows from experience that it also makes the situation more dangerous. Men questioning their orders become unpredictable, more likely to make impulsive decisions. As the morning progresses, Marcus allows his shopkeeper's facade to slip further, letting Wilson's observers see more of his true capabilities. Each movement, each interaction is calculated to send a message. They aren't facing a simple storekeeper, but someone who understands their methodologies intimately. Mayor Greenwich makes one final appearance, his political instincts providing unexpected insight. They're not just targeting our town, he observes. They're targeting what it represents, the idea that law and order can take root in the territories. Marcus recognizes the truth in this assessment. Wilson isn't just seeking revenge against specific individuals. He's attacking the very concept of frontier justice. Millbrook Valley, with its mix of commerce, law, and community, represents everything he believes destroyed his family. Noon approaches. Marcus receives one last piece of intelligence. Edward Weber has intercepted a partial message suggesting Wilson has a personal connection to one of the railroad executives attending tomorrow's special session. The man who specifically ordered the eviction that killed his family. This information completes the picture. Wilson isn't just choosing targets of opportunity, he's orchestrating an elaborate revenge scenario that will simultaneously destroy his personal enemies and demonstrate the vulnerability of frontier society. Marcus begins final preparations, his mind categorizing every aspect of Wilson's plan through the lens of his Pinkerton training. The demolitions expert has created an operation of incredible complexity, but that very complexity makes it vulnerable to someone who understands its underlying psychology. Tomorrow, when Wilson triggers his carefully planned sequence of destruction, he'll discover that his greatest weakness isn't in his technical preparations or tactical planning. It's in his assumption that he's facing simple townspeople rather than a carefully coordinated resistance led by someone who's spent years understanding exactly how men like him think and operate. The sun reaches its zenith over Millbrook Valley, marking the beginning of the final countdown. In 24 hours, Wilson's Project Carthage will either herald a new era of territorial chaos or serve as proof that even the most carefully planned destruction can be countered by those willing to stand together in defense of their home. Marcus checks his revolver one final time, the weight of his Pinkerton badge familiar against his chest. But his most powerful weapon remains his understanding of men like Wilson. Men who believe their technical expertise and tactical brilliance make them invulnerable to resistance from those they've marked for destruction. That understanding, combined with the hidden strengths of Millbrook Valley's residents, might just be enough to transform Wilson's masterpiece of demolition into a demonstration of a very different principle, that the true measure of frontier justice lies not in its vulnerability to destruction, but in its ability to unite people. In its defense, the afternoon sun beats down on Millbrook Valley when Wilson makes his first tactical error. Confident in his control of the situation, he decides to personally inspect the store that houses his increasingly troublesome shopkeeper. Two of his most experienced men flank him as he enters, their casual postures betraying their professional training. Marcus, arranging merchandise with deliberate precision, notes every detail of their entrance. Wilson moves with the measured pace of someone accustomed to calculating blast radii. His men position themselves to cover both exits while appearing to browse carelessly through the store's inventory. "Impressive display this morning," Wilson comments, examining a shelf of canned goods. "For a shopkeeper." The last word carries a weight of skepticism. "We all have our specialties, Mr. Wilson," Marcus responds, using the man's name deliberately. "Some build, some destroy, some protect what others would tear down." The tension in the store crystallizes. Wilson's men shift, subtly, their hands closer to their weapons. But their leader's reaction is more interesting, a fleeting expression of surprise followed by calculated reassessment. "Protective services, I assume?" Wilson's question carries layers of meaning. Railroad security, perhaps? Or something more specialized? Before Marcus can respond, a commotion erupts outside. One of the gang's younger members bursts in, his face flushed with urgency. "Sir, we've got trouble at the mine. Someone's been—" Wilson silences him with a sharp gesture. But the damage is done. Marcus notes every detail of their reactions, the specific concerns revealed in their expressions, the silent communications between them. "Unfortunate timing," Wilson remarks smoothly. "We'll continue this conversation later." But as he turns to leave, Marcus makes his move. "The geological survey equipment was an Army Corps of Engineers issue," he comments casually. "Project Carthage had very specific requirements for measuring structural weaknesses." Wilson freezes momentarily, then turns back with new intensity. "You're well informed for a frontier shopkeeper. And you're well equipped for a simple bank robber," Marcus counters. "Those modified survey tools, they're designed for calculating precise demolition patterns in mountainous terrain. The kind of calculations that could, theoretically, turn an entire valley into rubble." The conversation has shifted into dangerous territory. Wilson's men sense it, their pretense of casualness abandoned as they move to more tactical positions. But their leader seems almost energized by the revelation. "You understand, then?" Wilson's voice carries an edge of intellectual excitement. "The perfect confluence of natural and man-made vulnerabilities. This valley's geology, its structures, everything is positioned just so. A demonstration that will reshape how people think about frontier justice." "I understand more than you realize," Marcus responds, his shopkeeper's demeanor falling away completely. 7 years ago, Dakota Territory. A series of mysterious accidents at railroad construction sites, very precise accidents that somehow always managed to target specific support structures. Wilson's expression shifts again. Recognition, calculation, reassessment. "The Pinkerton who tracked those incidents. We never did identify him." A pause, heavy with implications. "You've been busy since then. As have you. Project Carthage was theoretical for a reason. The calculations might work perfectly, but the real world isn't a military engineering exercise. Variables can't always be controlled. Their exchange is interrupted by more urgent news from the mine. Wilson departs, but not before leaving a clear message. Variables can be adjusted for when you understand the underlying principles. Tomorrow's demonstration will prove that. The encounter's aftermath brings rapid developments. Through the root cellar network, Marcus learns that Hawk's scouts discovered and disabled several key surveying markers around the mine. Wilson's calculations will need adjustment, buying precious time for the town's defenders. Sarah Montgomery appears with crucial intelligence gathered from the schoolhouse. The gang's men are preparing for something specific, moving furniture, clearing sightlines to certain windows. They're creating sniper positions, though the children's presence prevents any direct intervention. Dr. Blackwood, making her rounds, reports increasing tension among the gang members. Wilson's sophisticated plans don't sit well with men who signed up for simple robbery. The discord creates opportunities, but also raises the risk of impulsive violence. As evening approaches, Marcus implements the next phase of his counter-strategy. Mrs. Chen's laundry girls begin spreading carefully crafted rumors about Wilson's true intentions. Not all his men know the full scope of his plans. Learning they're part of an operation designed to kill children shakes their loyalty. The fake military unit maintains their watch, but Marcus observes subtle changes in their behavior. Their commander seems less certain, perhaps recognizing that his opponent's knowledge of Project Carthage suggests connections to military intelligence operations. Through careful manipulation of sightlines and timing, Marcus allows Wilson's observers to witness a series of seemingly unrelated activities. Judge Clayton consulting military manuals, Michael Chen practicing precise surveying measurements. The Ribber family coordinates complex communication patterns. Each demonstration is calculated to suggest capabilities without revealing their full extent. Wilson's psychological profile, built from years of Pinkerton surveillance, suggests he'll respond to perceived technical expertise with increasing sophistication in his own plans. The strategy bears fruit when Charlie Weber intercepts a message suggesting Wilson has ordered additional explosives. He's adapting his plan, adding complexity that requires more time and resources. Every hour delayed increases the town's chances of survival. As night falls, Marcus receives unexpected intelligence from Eleanor Burke. Her evening bread deliveries to the saloon have revealed Wilson's men constructing a detailed scale model of the valley. Their leader's obsession with technical perfection is leading him to refine his calculations repeatedly. Through the gathering darkness, Marcus observes Wilson himself on the church's bell tower, using sophisticated surveying equipment to verify measurements. The demolition expert's need for precision has become compulsive, a vulnerability that can be exploited. Judge Clayton, arriving through the root cellar network, brings final confirmation. Wilson's original timeline has been disrupted. The additional calculations and equipment requirements have forced him to delay key aspects of his operation, but the judge also brought a warning. He's not just adapting his plans, Clayton reports, he's expanding them. The geological calculations now include the entire watershed. If his calculations are correct, the destruction could extend far beyond Millbrook Valley. Marcus processes this information through the lens of his Pinkerton experience. Wilson is revealing a pattern he's seen in other technical experts turned criminal, the tendency to pursue increasingly complex solutions, often at the expense of operational security. The night deepens, bringing new movements in the darkness. Wilson's men are positioning additional equipment, expanding their surveillance network, adding layers of complexity to their operation. Each addition makes their plan more sophisticated, but also more vulnerable to disruption. Marcus uses the cover of darkness to implement his own preparations. The town's defenders are positioned according to a plan that appears random, but serves a specific purpose, creating uncertainty in Wilson's calculations. Every changed variable forces him to revisit his technical assumptions. Through the root cellar network, Marcus coordinates with his improvised team. Each member plays their role in a carefully orchestrated effort to exploit Wilson's psychological needs. The demolition expert's drive for perfection has become both his greatest strength and his critical weakness. As midnight approaches, Marcus receives final confirmation of his strategy's effectiveness. Wilson has ordered his men to reposition several key charges, requiring complex recalculation of blast patterns. The technical challenge presented by an opponent who understands his methodology has pushed him toward ever more elaborate solutions. The stars wheel overhead as Marcus makes his final preparations. Tomorrow will test not just his ability to match Wilson's technical expertise, but his understanding of how to turn that very expertise against him. The demolitions expert believes he's creating a perfect demonstration of destruction. Instead, he's building an increasingly unstable operation that contains the seeds of its own failure. In the darkness above Millbrook Valley, Marcus allows himself a moment of grim satisfaction. Wilson's obsession with technical perfection has led him to create something far more sophisticated than his original plan, and far more vulnerable to someone who understands that sometimes the most effective opposition comes not from countering strength, but from encouraging its excess. A subtle flash of light from the church tower catches his attention. Using the store's back window as a vantage point, Marcus observes Wilson conducting another late-night survey. The demolitions expert's movements betray increasing frustration, each new measurement forcing him to revise complex calculations. Through the root cellar network, Michael Chen arrives with detailed observations of Wilson's latest adjustments. He's added secondary charges to every major junction, the former soldier reports. Triple redundancy on all primary detonation lines. The complexity is becoming exponential. Marcus recognizes the pattern from previous operations. Technical experts turned criminals often fall into a spiral of increasing sophistication, their professional pride demanding ever more perfect solutions. Each addition to Wilson's plan creates new variables that must be accounted for, new calculations that must be precise. Their discussion is interrupted by an urgent signal from Mrs. Chen's network. Two of Wilson's men have been overheard arguing about the latest changes. The more experienced demolitions experts are growing concerned about the plan's complexity, while younger members worry about the expanding blast radius calculations. He's losing them, Marcus observes. The professionals recognize when technical ambition exceeds practical limits. The others are starting to question the human cost. Dr. Blackwood arrives next, her medical bag concealing maps marked with Wilson's latest surveying positions. They're extending the calculations to include the aquifer system, she reports. He's trying to account for every possible subsurface feature that could affect blast propagation. This development confirms Marcus's strategy is working. Wilson's drive for technical perfection has led him to consider increasingly complex geological factors. Each new variable forces him to revise and expand his plans, creating more potential points of failure. A commotion from the saloon draws attention. Through carefully positioned observers, Marcus learns that Wilson's second-in-command has challenged some of the recent changes. The argument centers on the practical difficulties of coordinating such a complex detonation sequence. Technical perfection versus operational reality, Marcus explains to Judge Clayton, who's arrived to discuss the latest developments. Wilson's pursuing a mathematically perfect solution, but his men understand that field operations rarely go exactly as planned. The judge, drawing on his own military experience, grasps the implications. The more complex the plan, the more points of potential failure. And from what I'm seeing, he's creating an operation so intricate that even minor disruptions could cascade through the entire system. Their analysis is confirmed by Charlie Reber's latest intelligence. The boy has managed to copy portions of Wilson's revised calculations, pages of complex mathematical formulas dealing with blast wave propagation, structural stress points, and geological fault line interactions. He's not just planning demolitions anymore, Marcus notes, studying the equations. He's trying to create a perfectly orchestrated sequence of destruction. Each explosion is precisely timed and placed to trigger specific geological reactions. Sarah Montgomery provides additional confirmation from her observations at the school. Wilson's men have been forced to reposition their charges multiple times, each adjustment requiring new calculations for blast angles and structural impacts. The night brings more signs of growing discord within Wilson's organization. Hawk's scouts report increased arguments among the gang members. The fake military unit's commander has expressed concerns about their ability to maintain security with constantly shifting plans. Through the bakery's root cellar, Eleanor Burke shares intelligence, gathered during her evening deliveries. Wilson has ordered specialized equipment from hidden caches, precision timing devices, and advanced surveying tools that even his own demolitions experts aren't fully familiar with. Marcus uses this information to implement the next phase of his strategy. Through carefully orchestrated movements and accidentally revealed documents, he ensures Wilson's observers spot hints of geological surveys that contradict some of their calculations. The reaction is immediate. Wilson orders another complete review of their blast pattern calculations. His men, already stretched thin by the plan's complexity, must now recheck every measurement and formula. As dawn approaches, Marcus receives final confirmation that his psychological warfare is succeeding. Edward Weber's telegraph network intercepts coded messages revealing Wilson has postponed several key aspects of his operation. The need for additional calculations and equipment has forced him to modify his timeline. But success brings its own dangers. Through the root cellar network, Marcus learns that Wilson's increasing obsession with technical perfection has made him more determined than ever to create an unmatched demonstration of destructive power. He's not just trying to destroy the town anymore, Judge Clayton observes grimly. He's attempting to prove something, to himself as much as to others, that his understanding of demolitions and geology can create something unprecedented in the history of warfare. Marcus watches the first light of dawn touch Millbrook Valley's highest points. Wilson's technical brilliance has become both his greatest asset and his critical vulnerability. By encouraging his drive for perfection, they've led him to create an operation so complex that its success depends on absolutely everything going according to precise calculations. Tomorrow, when Wilson triggers his masterpiece of destruction, he'll discover that the most sophisticated plans often contain the seeds of their own failure. And in pushing for technical perfection, he's handed his opponents exactly what they need: time, opportunities, and most importantly, an operation so intricate that even small disruptions could unravel the entire scheme. Marcus checks his revolver. One final time, the weight of his Pinkerton badge, a reminder of years spent studying men like Wilson. Sometimes, the most effective strategy isn't to directly oppose strength, but to encourage its transformation into weakness. By tomorrow night, the demolitions expert will learn that lesson, assuming any of them survive his attempt at creating the perfect apocalypse. The pre-dawn hours bring unexpected intelligence. Through the root cellar network, Hawk delivers crucial information gathered from his latest scouting mission. Found this in their secondary camp, he reports, producing a worn journal that makes Marcus's blood run cold. The journal, its pages, filled with precise technical drawings, reveals Wilson's previous experiments with geological demolitions. Smaller operations, testing his theories about triggering natural fault lines. Each attempt was more ambitious than the last, leading up to Millbrook Valley, his masterpiece. He's been planning this longer than we thought, Marcus realizes, studying the progression of increasingly complex calculations. Every previous operation was just preparation, gathering data for this final demonstration. Sarah Montgomery arrives next, her early morning presence at the store justified by the need for school supplies. Her real purpose is to share disturbing Observations about Wilson's psychological state. He spent hours in the schoolhouse last night, she reports. Not checking the explosives or positions, just standing there, staring at the children's artwork on the walls. There was something haunted in his expression. Marcus connects this information with details from Wilson's military records. His daughter would be about their age now, he notes grimly. The school isn't just a tactical position, it's become personal for him. The psychological insight suggests new vulnerabilities to exploit. Through carefully orchestrated movements, Marcus ensures Wilson observes several of the town's children playing safely distant from the school. Each glimpse forces the demolition expert to confront the human cost of his technical ambitions. Doctor. Blackwood brings additional intelligence gathered during her morning rounds. Wilson's men have been complaining of headaches and trembling hands, signs of exhaustion from endless recalculations and equipment adjustments. They're approaching their breaking point, she assesses professionally. The human mind can only handle so much precision work before fatigue sets in. One mistake in their calculations could have catastrophic consequences. Michael Chen, using his military training, has identified another weakness in Wilson's expanding plans. The timing mechanisms they're using require perfect synchronization. Even a half-second delay in any part of the sequence could disrupt the entire chain reaction. This technical detail provides Marcus with new opportunities. Through the Weber family's telegraph network, he arranges for specific rumors to reach Wilson's men. Hints about geological surveys that contradict their calculations, suggesting their timing sequences might be flawed. The reaction is immediate and devastating. Wilson orders another complete review of their detonation patterns, forcing his already exhausted men to recheck countless measurements and formulas. Eleanor Burke's morning bread deliveries bring more signs of growing discord. The gang's younger members are increasingly vocal about their concerns, while the professional demolitions experts question the feasibility of coordinating such a complex operation. Mrs. Chen's laundry network observes Wilson's response to this internal tension. The demolitions expert has begun double-checking his men's work personally, creating further delays and resentment. Through careful positioning, Marcus allows Wilson to observe him conducting what appears to be his own geological surveys. The store's ledger, deliberately left visible, contains complex calculations that hint at understanding of blast wave propagation. Judge Clayton, arriving for his morning visit, notes Wilson's reaction through the store window. He's watching you like a man who's just discovered a rival mathematician checking his work, the judge observes. Nothing unsettles a technical expert more than peer review. The psychological warfare escalates when Charlie Weber delivers a message that appears routine but contains deliberately visible technical errors in Wilson's latest calculations. The boy's timing is perfect. The demolitions expert receives the information just as he's reviewing critical blast radius estimates. The impact ripples through Wilson's organization. His increasingly frantic demands for precision force his men to revise and adjust equipment they've already positioned multiple times. Each change requires new calculations, creating more opportunities for potentially catastrophic errors. Marcus coordinates these psychological pressures with physical preparations. The town's defenders, moving under cover of normal daily activities, systematically create small discrepancies in Wilson's carefully measured sightlines and distances. Hawk's scouts, operating with minimal communication, subtly alter surveying markers and reference points. Each tiny change forces Wilson to question and recheck his fundamental calculations. As morning fully arrives, Marcus receives confirmation that his strategy has achieved its primary objective. Wilson's obsession with technical perfection has transformed a dangerous but straightforward operation into something so complex that even his most experienced men doubt its feasibility. The demolition expert's drive for the perfect demonstration has led him to create an operational plan that requires absolutely everything to work exactly as calculated. No room for error, no allowance for the chaos inherent in any military operation. Through the root cellar network, Marcus coordinates final preparations with his improvised team. Each member understands their role in the coming confrontation, not just their tactical positions, but how their actions will exploit Wilson's psychological vulnerabilities. The morning sun illuminates a town that appears peaceful, but bristles with hidden purpose. Wilson's technical brilliance has led him to create something unprecedented, a demonstration of destruction so precisely calculated that even minor disruptions could cascade through the entire system. Marcus makes his final arrangements knowing that the coming hours will test not just their physical preparations, but their understanding of how obsession can transform strength into vulnerability. Wilson believes he's creating the perfect operation. Instead, he's built an increasingly unstable structure that contains the seeds of its own collapse. The store's bell chimes as Wilson himself enters for one final confrontation. The demolition expert's appearance betrays signs of sleepless nights, spent checking and rechecking calculations. His technical genius has become both his greatest asset and his ultimate weakness. Impressive understanding of blast wave propagation, Wilson comments, gesturing to the deliberately visible calculations. For a shopkeeper, the last words carry both threat and professional curiosity. Marcus allows his facade to slip just enough to suggest deeper technical knowledge. Engineering is engineering, he responds carefully, whether you're building something up or planning to tear it down. The principles remain the same. Their exchange carries layers of meaning beneath the surface. Two technical experts recognizing each other's capabilities, each understanding that tomorrow's confrontation will be decided not just by physical action, but by whose grasp of underlying principles proves more comprehensive. As Wilson departs, Marcus reflects on the transformation they've engineered. By encouraging the demolition expert's drive for perfection, they've led him to create something far more sophisticated than his original plan, and far more vulnerable to disruption by opponents who understand that sometimes the most effective resistance comes from within. The midday sun brings new developments. Through the store's window, Marcus observes Wilson conducting another meticulous inspection of the town square. The demolition expert's movements betray increasing anxiety, each measurement forcing him to confront new variables in his calculations. Judge Clayton arrives through the root cellar, bringing intelligence gathered from his courthouse observations. Wilson's men have been studying the building's architectural plans, he reports, but they're not just looking at structural weaknesses, they're calculating blast wave reflections off every surface. This detail reveals another layer of Wilson's obsession. He's not just planning controlled demolitions, he's trying to choreograph the actual destruction, designing specific patterns of collapse that would maximize both physical and psychological impact. Michael Chen, using his military engineering training, identifies a critical flaw in this approach. Blast wave behavior becomes exponentially more unpredictable with each reflection surface, he explains. He's trying to calculate something that's fundamentally chaotic. Sarah Montgomery arrives next, her presence covered by normal school business. She brings disturbing observations about Wilson's behavior during his latest school inspection. He spent an hour studying the children's science projects, she reports, particularly their models of local geology. Something about their simple representations seemed to trouble him deeply. Marcus recognizes the psychological significance. Wilson's technical expertise has become a trap. The more he understands about the complexity of his task, the more variables he feels compelled to control. Through the bakery's root cellar network, Eleanor Burke shares intelligence gathered from her afternoon deliveries. Wilson's men have begun arguing about the practical limitations of their equipment. Their timing mechanisms, while sophisticated, may not be capable of the split-second precision their leaders' calculations demand. Mrs. Chen's laundry girls report increasing tension between Wilson's demolition experts and his regular gang members. The technical demands of the operation have created a divide. Those who understand the complexity are growing fearful, while those who don't grow increasingly frustrated. Charlie Webber, making his rounds with telegrams, delivers coded observations about Wilson's latest equipment adjustments. The demolitions expert has ordered specialized timing devices from his hidden caches, devices so precise they require constant recalibration. Dr. Blackwood, attending to minor injuries among Wilson's men, notes telling symptoms of psychological strain. They're showing classic signs of anxiety-induced errors, she reports. Shaking hands, second-guessing basic procedures, obsessing over minute details. Hawk returns from another scouting mission with crucial intelligence. Wilson's expanded calculations now include weather patterns, barometric pressure variations, even the possibility of seismic disturbances from distant mining operations. He's lost perspective, Marcus concludes, studying the new information. The technical challenge has become more important than the original objective. He's no longer planning an operation. He's trying to prove a theoretical point about the perfect demonstration of destruction. Through carefully orchestrated movements, Marcus ensures Wilson observes seemingly random activities that force him to question his calculations. A water barrel moved slightly, changing fluid dynamics calculations. A pile of lumber stacked differently, affecting blast wave reflections. Each small change requires complex mathematical adjustments. The psychological pressure shows results when Wilson makes his final inspection of the store. His usual confident demeanor has been replaced by something more intense, the look of a man who sees potentially critical variables in every detail. Fascinating properties of sound reflection in this building, Wilson comments, studying the store's layout. The acoustic patterns could affect blast wave propagation in ways I hadn't considered. His voice carries the edge of someone discovering new complexities in an already overwhelming problem. Marcus encourages this line of thinking with carefully chosen responses, suggesting additional variables that Wilson's calculations might need to address. Each new consideration forces the demolitions expert to revisit and expand his already complex plans. As evening approaches, the town's defenders observe signs that their strategy has succeeded beyond expectations. Wilson's operation, originally designed as a straightforward demonstration of destructive power, has evolved into something far more ambitious and far more fragile. Through the root cellar network, Marcus coordinates final adjustments to their counter-strategy. Each defender understands their role in exploiting the vulnerabilities they've helped create. Wilson's obsession with technical perfection has given them exactly what they need, an operation so precisely calculated that even minor disruptions could unravel the entire scheme. The sun sets on a town that appears peaceful, but vibrates with hidden tension. In his pursuit of the perfect demolition, Wilson has transformed a dangerous but practical plan into something that exists more in mathematical theory than military reality. Marcus makes his final preparations, knowing that tomorrow will test not just their physical defenses, but their understanding of how technical brilliance can become its own worst enemy. Wilson believes he's creating an unprecedented demonstration of controlled destruction. Instead, he's built an operation so complex that its success depends on an impossible level of precision. As night falls, Marcus observes Wilson on the church tower, making one final set of calculations by lamplight. The demolitions expert's silhouette tells a story of obsession, a man who began with a plan for revenge, but has been drawn into a quest for technical perfection that may prove his undoing. The darkness brings an eerie quiet to Millbrook Valley, broken only by the occasional movement of Wilson's men, adjusting equipment according to their leader's increasingly precise demands. Each adjustment, each recalculation, adds another layer of complexity to an operation that has grown far beyond its original scope. Tomorrow, when Wilson triggers his masterpiece of destruction, he'll discover that the most sophisticated plans often contain their own fatal flaws. And in pushing for technical perfection, he's created something that requires everything to work exactly as calculated, a standard that reality rarely meets. Dawn breaks over Millbrook Valley with an unnatural stillness. Wilson's exhausted. Men, having spent the night making final adjustments to their equipment, take up their assigned positions. The special session at the courthouse is scheduled to begin in 3 hours, and every element of their intricate plan must execute with perfect precision. Marcus observes the proceedings from his store window, noting how Wilson's obsession with technical perfection has affected his men. Their movements betray fatigue and uncertainty, the result of endless recalculations and equipment adjustments. Through the root cellar network, reports arrive from throughout the town. Sarah Montgomery signals that the school's captive children have been moved to specific positions, exactly as Wilson's calculations require. Dr. Blackwood confirms the fake military unit has established their final surveillance posts. Hawks, Scouts report the Collins mine charges are set for precise sequential detonation. Everything according to his perfect plan, Marcus comments to Judge Clayton, who's arrived through the hidden entrance. Which means everything is exactly where we need it to be. The judge studies the detailed counter-strategy mapped out on Marcus's backroom table. You're certain about this? One miscalculation on our part. Wilson's done our work for us, Marcus explains. He's created something so precisely balanced that it can't absorb unexpected variables. Now we just have to introduce them at exactly the right moments. The operation begins with Sarah Montgomery's carefully orchestrated move. During the children's morning lessons, she accidentally drops a box of chalk, sending pieces rolling across specific floorboards. The sound carries to Wilson's observers, forcing them to question their acoustic calculations for blast wave propagation. Simultaneously, Eleanor Burke's morning bread deliveries include slightly damp loaves. The increased moisture content affects Wilson's carefully calculated humidity levels, requiring last-minute adjustments to his timing mechanisms. Through the town's windows, Marcus observes Wilson himself moving from position to position, obsessively, checking and rechecking measurements. The demolition expert's expression shows growing concern, each tiny variation forcing him to revise complex mathematical sequences. The courthouse special session begins right on schedule. Railroad executives, landowners, and territorial officials file into the building, unknowingly taking positions that Wilson has calculated down to the inch. But Michael Chen, coordinating with the Weber family's telegraph network, has arranged subtle differences in their seating arrangement. 2 inches off here, 3 degrees rotation there, Michael explains through the root cellar communication system. Small enough to miss during casual observation, but significant enough to affect blast wave calculations. Wilson's reaction to these accumulating variables becomes increasingly agitated. His men report seeing him repeatedly revising figures, muttering calculations under his breath. The perfect demonstration he's planned requires absolute precision. Any deviation threatens the entire sequence. The fake military unit commander, observing from his position near the school, shows growing unease. His training tells him that field operations never go exactly as planned, that flexibility is essential. But Wilson's intricate plan leaves no room for adaptation. As noon approaches, Marcus implements the next phase. Mrs. Chen's laundry girls, moving through their normal routines, subtly adjust the moisture content of soil around key positions. The changed ground density forces Wilson to reconsider his calculations for shockwave transmission. Dr. Blackwood, making her rounds, notes Wilson's deteriorating psychological state. Classic symptoms of obsessive fixation, she reports. He's lost the ability to distinguish between critical variables and minor fluctuations. Everything must be perfect. The tension peaks when Charlie Weber delivers a message that appears routine, but contains deliberately visible mathematical errors in Wilson's final calculations. The demolitions expert's reaction is immediate and severe, ordering another complete review of their detonation sequences mere hours before execution. Through carefully positioned observers, Marcus monitors the growing discord among Wilson's men. The professional demolitions experts recognize the danger in their leader's obsession with perfection, while the regular gang members grow increasingly frustrated with endless technical adjustments. Judge Clayton, maintaining his judicial demeanor, ensures the special session proceeds according to schedule. But each speaker's position, each movement in the courthouse, has been carefully choreographed to create minor discrepancies in Wilson's blast pattern calculations. The first major break comes when one of Wilson's younger men, exhausted and confused by constant revisions, makes a critical error while adjusting a timing mechanism. The mistake is small but significant, introducing a variable that Wilson's perfect calculations can't accommodate. Marcus, observing through his store window, recognizes the moment Wilson realizes his plan is unraveling. The demolition expert's expression shifts from confidence to desperate calculation as he tries to compensate for cascading variables. Now, Marcus signals through the root cellar network. The town's defenders move with coordinated precision, each performing actions that seem random but serve to further destabilize Wilson's carefully balanced equations. Hawk's scouts, positioned in the surrounding hills, begin subtly altering surveying markers. The Weber family's telegraph network transmits coded messages that force Wilson to question his timing sequences. Sarah Montgomery's students sing songs whose acoustic vibrations affect precision measurements. The demolitions expert's composure finally breaks when he discovers that the geological calculations he'd based everything on contained a fundamental flaw. The mistake isn't in his math. It's in the assumption that natural systems can be perfectly predicted and controlled. Wilson's desperate attempt to salvage his plan leads to his final error. In trying to adjust for multiple variables simultaneously, he introduces inconsistencies into his own detonation sequences. The perfect demonstration he'd planned becomes increasingly unstable. The confrontation reaches its climax in the town square. Wilson, realizing his intricate plan is collapsing, attempts to trigger a manual detonation. But his own obsession with technical perfection has led him to create a system so complex that even he can't predict how it will react to unplanned inputs. Marcus makes his final move, revealing his full capabilities as a former Pinkerton agent. The years spent studying demolition experts and their methodologies allow him to understand exactly how Wilson's perfect plan will fail. The resulting chaos is precisely controlled, not by Wilson's calculations, but by the town's defenders executing their own carefully planned counter-strategy. Each charge is neutralized, each detonation sequence disrupted, not through superior force, but through the exploitation of the plan's own complexity. As the dust settles, Wilson faces the ultimate irony. His pursuit of the perfect demolition, his need to control every variable, has led him to create something so intricate that it contained the seeds of its own failure. The Red River Gang, their leader's technical brilliance transformed into vulnerability, finds themselves outmaneuvered not just by a former Pinkerton agent, but by an entire town that understood something Wilson had forgotten. That sometimes the most effective resistance comes from allowing complexity to collapse under its own weight. Marcus, surveying the aftermath, reflects on the transformation they've witnessed. A brilliant demolitions expert, driven by revenge and technical pride, had created the perfect plan for destruction. But in pursuing mathematical perfection, he'd lost sight of the fundamental truth that the real world rarely conforms to precise calculations. The townspeople emerge from their positions, each having played their part in turning Wilson's strength against him. Sarah Montgomery leads her students to safety. Dr. Blackwood tends to minor injuries. The Weber family's telegraph network coordinates with territorial authorities. Judge Clayton, resuming his judicial duties, prepares to address the consequences of the day's events. But his first words acknowledge something important, that Millbrook Valley survived not through superior force or better planning, but through understanding how technical brilliance can become its own worst enemy. As the sun sets on a town that refused to be destroyed, Marcus returns to his store. The Pinkerton badge that had remained hidden for so long now rests openly on his counter, a reminder that sometimes the most effective agent isn't the one who fights the hardest, but the one who understands how to let an opponent's strength become their greatest weakness. The evening brings a final irony. Among Wilson's confiscated papers, they find the complete calculations for Project Carthage, his perfect plan for systematic destruction. The documents will be studied by military engineers and demolition experts, not as a blueprint for destruction, but as a cautionary tale about the dangers of pursuing technical perfection at the expense of practical reality. Millbrook Valley returns to its quiet routine, but something has changed. The town's residents have learned that their greatest strength wasn't in weapons or fortifications, but in understanding how to turn an opponent's obsession with perfection into the ultimate tool for their own survival. In the days that follow, the town processes the aftermath of Wilson's failed demonstration. The fake military unit, their commander realizing the futility of resistance, surrenders to territorial authorities. Many of them, professional soldiers led astray by Wilson's technical brilliance, provide valuable testimony about the inner workings of the Red River Gang. Marcus finds himself handling an unexpected flood of visitors. Railroad executives, impressed by the town's defense, seek his counsel on protecting other frontier settlements. Military engineers study the recovered Project Carthage documents, learning not just about demolitions, but about the dangers of over-reliance on technical solutions. Sarah Montgomery's school becomes a symbol of resilience. Her students, having witnessed the power of knowledge used for protection rather than destruction, show renewed interest in their studies. The children's simple understanding of local geology had, ironically, helped expose the flaws in Wilson's complex calculations. Dr. Blackwood's analysis of Wilson during his custody reveals deeper insights into his psychological deterioration. His technical brilliance became a prison, she explains to Judge Clayton. Each calculation added another bar to his cage, until he couldn't see beyond the mathematics to basic reality. The Weber family's telegraph network expands, recognized now as a vital part of territorial security. Edward Weber's expertise in communications proves invaluable in coordinating responses to other threats along the frontier. Young Charlie, his courage during the crisis noted by territorial authorities, receives formal training in intelligence gathering. Mrs. Chen's laundry becomes an unofficial clearinghouse for information about suspicious activities in the region. Her daughter's careful observations and subtle intelligence gathering prove as valuable as any official law enforcement network. Hawks. Scouts find themselves increasingly called upon by neighboring settlements. Their understanding of how to observe and disrupt criminal operations without direct confrontation becomes a model for frontier defense. Michael Chen's military expertise finds new application. The territorial governor, impressed by his role in Countering Wilson's plan appoints him to a special commission studying methods of protecting frontier communities through strategic preparation rather than brute force. Eleanor Burke's bakery remains a hub of community activity, but with added significance. The route cellar network, expanded and formalized, becomes part of the town's official emergency response system. Her ability to maintain normal routines while coordinating complex operations proves invaluable in future crises. Judge Clayton's courtroom sees an interesting transformation. His handling of Wilson's case sets new precedents for dealing with technically sophisticated crimes. The legal principles established become a foundation for addressing similar threats throughout the territory. The Red River Gang's remaining members, scattered and demoralized, find themselves facing a changed frontier. Other criminal organizations, learning of their fate, become wary of communities that appear vulnerable but might harbor hidden strengths. Wilson himself, awaiting trial, becomes a subject of study for military and law enforcement officials. His brilliant mind, still processing the failure of his perfect plan, provides insights into how technical expertise can be turned against itself. Marcus's store continues its daily operations, but with subtle differences. The shelves still stock ordinary supplies, but visiting Pinkerton agents recognize it as something more, a model for how routine commerce can mask sophisticated security operations. The town's success in defending itself leads to broader changes in frontier security strategy. Other communities begin developing their own networks of seemingly ordinary citizens who understand how to recognize and counter sophisticated threats. 3 months after Wilson's failed operation, Marcus receives a letter from the Pinkerton Agency's central office. They've been studying Millbrook Valley's defense as a case study in how to counter technically brilliant adversaries. Your approach, the letter notes, demonstrates that the most effective defense doesn't always require matching an opponent's capabilities. Sometimes it's better to let their own expertise become their vulnerability. The courthouse special session that Wilson had targeted becomes an annual event, but with a different focus. Instead of just handling property disputes, it includes discussions of community defense and the importance of balancing technical expertise with practical wisdom. Sarah Montgomery's students write essays about their experience, their simple perspectives, providing surprising insights into how communities can resist sophisticated threats. Their work, collected and studied by territorial authorities, reveals how innocence sometimes sees truths that expertise overlooks. Dr. Blackwood's medical practice evolves to include understanding psychological aspects of criminal behavior. Her observations about how Wilson's technical obsession led to his downfall help other communities identify similar vulnerabilities in potential threats. The Weber family establishes a formal training program for frontier telegraph operators, teaching not just communication skills, but how to recognize and report suspicious patterns. Their network becomes a model for early warning systems throughout the territory. Mrs. Chen's daughters open their own businesses in neighboring towns, each establishment serving as both a legitimate enterprise and a subtle observation post. Their success demonstrates how ordinary commerce can support community security without compromising normal life. Hawke's reputation grows among both law enforcement and criminal organizations. His ability to gather intelligence while appearing to be nothing more than a simple tracker makes him particularly effective in identifying threats before they develop. Michael Chen's military commission expands its scope, studying how civilian communities can organize effective defense without appearing militarized. His experiences in Millbrook Valley prove crucial in developing strategies that preserve normal life while maintaining security. Eleanor Burke's baking skills become legendary throughout the territory, but few realize how her seemingly ordinary deliveries often carry crucial intelligence. Her ability to maintain perfect normalcy while coordinating complex operations becomes a template for other communities. Judge Clayton's legal decisions, shaped by his experience with Wilson's case, help establish new frameworks for dealing with technically sophisticated crimes. His balanced approach to justice, combining technical understanding with practical wisdom, influences legal practice throughout the frontier. Marcus himself receives numerous offers to relocate, but chooses to remain in Millbrook Valley. The store continues its double role, serving daily needs while providing a model for how ordinary businesses can support community security. The town's success story spreads throughout the territories, not as a tale of dramatic confrontation, but as an example of how communities can defend themselves through understanding rather than force. The lesson becomes clear. Sometimes the most effective defense against brilliant adversaries is letting their own expertise become their downfall. As life in Millbrook Valley returns to its routine, the town retains its newfound wisdom. Behind the peaceful facade of commerce and community life lies a deeper understanding that true security comes not from matching an opponent's strength, but from knowing how to turn that very strength into vulnerability. Up next, you got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.